If you were to stack every virus on top of each other, the tower would reach a height of 200 million light-years. What is the most unbelievable fact that is actually true? In the last 20 years, most cancers have gone from being a death sentence to now being treatable or curable. In 15 years we went from antibodies being hard to produce to now being almost totally customizable by scientists. In the last 5 years we have managed to turn HIV into a viral vector to helping eradicate leukemia, and in the next 2 that will soon include Parkinson's, hemophilia, wet AMD, and many other once debilitating diseases. We are in a golden age of medicine right now. It took the creator of the Rubik's Cube, Aaron Rubik, 1 month to solve the cube after he created it. As of June 2018, the world record is 3.47 seconds. There is a species of tick that if it bites you, you'll become allergic to red meat. There are 2 ticks responsible for alpha-gal syndrome, allergic reaction to meat, primarily red meat. In North America we have the butthole, the Lone Star tick. In Australia, the role of the butthole is played by the paralysis tick. What makes this even more terrifying is that it makes you allergic specifically to non-primate mammalian meat, which means that human meat is still on the menu. The universe is somewhere around 13 billion years old, yet it is theorized to have enough energy to continue its existence for another 100 trillion years. We are at the very beginning of everything, relatively speaking. Whenever I see something like this, I'm reminded of the timeline of the far future on Wikipedia. It puts the last meaningful date in the universe at 15 quadrillion years or so, by which point every atom has dissolved from quantum tunneling. The 2 that get me the most. Gwen Stefani is older than Ted Cruz. There is a fence in Australia longer than the distance from New York City to London. In 1956 a man named Tommy Fitzpatrick stole a small plane from New Jersey for a bet, and then landed it perfectly on the narrow street in front of the bar he had been drinking at in Manhattan. 2 years later, he did it again after someone didn't believe he had done it the first time. What's even crazier is the punishment for the first time ended up being only a $100 fine, since the charges were dropped by the owner of the plane, and the second resulted in only 6 months in jail. Can you imagine someone getting away so lightly nowadays? Mark Twain was born on the day when Halley's Comet flew by Earth. He said, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." Halley's Comet next appeared on April 21, 1910, which is the day Mark Twain died. Miscarriages can happen whenever, wherever, however, no matter how well you take care of yourself and your baby. What I found to be the most unbelievable part, there doesn't always have to be a cause, or at least one that you know of. Your baby can slip away and you may not know why. In the past I never thought twice about this until my first miscarriage. Now I'm pregnant again, I'm absolutely pooping myself in case it happens again. There are over 10 million times more viruses on Earth than there are stars in the known universe. If you were to stack every virus on top of each other, the tower would reach a height of 200 million light-years, past the edge of the Milky Way. I did the math to try and prove it wrong, but I don't see any mistake. There are more bacteria in and on your body than actual cells that make up your flesh and bones. Yes, bacteria super tiny, and by mass, contribute to like 5 to 6 pounds of your total body weight. 10-to-1 ratio by number of bacteria to human cells. European ships sailed the Pacific for over 250 years without discovering Hawaii. They knew New Zealand existed by observing whales and birds. They knew that whales calved in the shelter of land and noticed whales traveling with calves. So they knew that land existed. They observed the direction the whales and birds were traveling and backtraced to where they knew there was land. Time dilation. GPS systems wouldn't work without taking this into account, which is something most people think of as science fiction or at best some theoretical thing. Say, for example, that you are standing still. You see an object pass by you. The faster that object moves, the slower it appears to age. People often say that if this object was a person carrying a clock, the clock would appear to tick slower. The crazy thing about this is that it is not an illusion. Time actually does slow down for moving objects, at any speed, not just incredibly fast speeds. This leads to some pretty neat effects like those seen in the twins paradox, which we will not discuss further. This also can be shown to imply that no object can move faster than the speed of light. These are all consequences of Einstein's special relativity. Of course, since satellites move relative to us, time dilation occurs. However, it is often noted that satellites need to account for the gravitational effects on time as well, as specified by the general theory of relativity. Together, these calculations are extremely accurate and allow modern GPS to function. Side note, time dilation refers to the stretching of time for moving objects. You may have also heard of length contraction, another consequence of special relativity, which refers to the shrinking of length for moving objects. Using the names alone, you can often get an intuition for what is happening to a moving object. During World War II, the United States government not only temporarily legalized weed production, but released an educational documentary about how to properly grow marijuana plants. The Japanese occupation of the Pacific theaters cut basically all of America's hemp supply. The shortage was so bad that the government granted farmers who grew it, and their families, immunity from the draft. Then once World War II was over, the Department of Agriculture worked tirelessly to try and destroy all evidence they'd done this. They failed. You can still see documentaries on YouTube. There is more time between the last Stegosaurus and the first T-Rex than there is between the last T-Rex and humans. There is more time between the building of the pyramids and Cleopatra than there is between Cleopatra and present day. Only 5% of the ocean has been discovered or explored. And the search for that Malaysian Airlines flight produced a massive trove of seabed data unlike anything before it. If we are lucky, we still live only around 850,000 hours. And you're only awake for about 561,000 of those. It's been said it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill or trade, which would be 85% of your life apparently. Suddenly all that time spent on Steam games is seeming to be too much. The man that is responsible for the creation of the Nobel Peace Prize also invented dynamite. He read his obituary because everyone thought he died, and he realized that everyone hated him and called him the Merchant of Death, and decided to make the Nobel Prizes. Some species of turtles can breathe out of their buttholes. Some people talk out of theirs. If you count every single star in the Milky Way galaxy, and if you only take 1 second per star, it will take you about 12,000 years to count them all. Oh, and I was just talking about our galaxy. There are an estimated 200 billion other galaxies in the observable universe. And we have more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. If you listen to people patiently, look them in the eye and ask questions that draw them out and show you are interested, you will be thought of as charming, even charismatic, and trustworthy. That human culture and behavior is almost entirely inconsistent. Since the advent of the modern field, anthropologists have been looking for the single cultural commonality among all people, and the closest they have ever come is that everyone pretty much agrees what color is true: red. That is for cultures that have the word and concept of red. There are many that just have light and dark. Things many of us completely take for granted all have counterexamples throughout history and currently. Mothers will protect their kids, people fear death and choose to avoid it, suicide is looked down upon, people enjoy and desire sex, men want to have multiple partners and are natural leaders in less complex or ancient societies. Human cultural evolution has been so fast compared to biological evolution. Things have gone in all sorts of directions that seem completely illogical by the standards of straight-up Darwinian evolution. Yet, that is how it is. Source: I am an evolutionary biologist who spent many years first as a cultural and then a biological anthropologist. Oh, I have many. The Rainhill Trials, which basically marked the start of widespread use of steam locomotives, had an entrant that was a horse on a treadmill. The last glacier in Scotland melted in the 16th century. Marlon Brando and Richard Pryor were once an item. Slaves on Montserrat spoke Irish. There was a proposal for France and the UK to merge. The earliest evidence for transgender people we have is older than the evidence for gay people. In the days of Robert the Bruce, Irish and Scots Gaelic were so mutually intelligible they were considered the same language. By some linguistic definitions, French and Italian are dialects of each other. There was a Basque Icelandic pidgin used by traders of the Basque country in Iceland. Ancient China and ancient Rome knew about each other. The Gaelic word for England, Sasn, and the Welsh word for English, Saesneg, both derived from the World Saxon, aka, the Anglo-Saxons that lived in England before 1066. South Africa had nukes but gave them up. Barcelona was run by anarcho-syndicalists in 1936. The county of Van Zandt, after the American Civil War declared independence, fought off the American cavalry, then lost the very next day because the people were too hungover from celebrating. Raspberry and vanilla flavored ice cream may be enhanced with castoreum, which is drawn from beaver anal glands. It's all natural and non-GMO. A trait that many people who have trouble making human connections have in common is not low self-confidence, low social IQs, or low empathy, but rather than they just take themselves too seriously. Taking yourself too seriously is maybe the most potent social poison. Think of all those nice guys and the incels of the world. Taking oneself too seriously makes a person a magnet for bullies and continued bullying. It makes people seem irritable, snobby, overly sensitive, and just generally not fun at all. Plus, as they say, learn to laugh at yourself and you'll be amused your whole life. LIGO, the observatory that we use to detect gravitational waves, is so sensitive it is able to detect a change in distance between its mirrors 1/10,000th the width of a proton. This is equivalent to measuring the distance to the nearest star, some 4.2 light-years, to an accuracy smaller than the width of a human hair. The platypus doesn't have nipples to feed their young with. Instead they sweat milk through their pores. Breast milk glands are basically just modified sweat glands. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button to become an ice cream sandwich with V8 engine, and activate the notification bell for more fact videos. Click the right box for the Reddit Facts playlist. Share your own facts in the comments below.